Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Eastern Clash here, live from Incheon, South Korea. I'm going to be Wade Dreadnought Penboth here. At the desk is going to be joining me. It's G-Clef, and as always, your Western Clash champion, Snitch, on the left-hand side. Guys, we just saw a pretty dominant performance there coming out from Blossom up against SPT. We're going to have a lot of Korea taking on China. What are your thoughts of what we've seen so far?
Well, that was China #1 versus Korea's #4. So you can kind of expect what's going to happen later on, and not to put anyone down, but that's going to be basically Korea dominating the first day for sure, I'm pretty sure. CE versus Tempest, you can kind of tell what's going to happen. You can see what's going to happen. Tempest, #2 from Korea versus CE China #3. I think Tempest is going to be very strong right now.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool to see how this kind of unfolds. Snitch, any thoughts after that first series?
I mean, I think it's clear that, like I said, we talked to, the Chinese teams and everybody's saying the same thing. SPT is our hope, SPT is our #1, and then we just saw SPT get kind of crushed. So I think, yeah, it kind of sets a precedent for the rest of the day. I think we can definitely expect Korea to be the dominant force throughout the rest of these series. But I'm kind of excited to see the differences between Blossom and Tempest and kind of see what is Tempest doing so much better that makes them the #2 seed.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And I do want to raise at least a counterpoint to what you guys have said here with the results of looking at the #1 seed in China. And one thing we do have to remember is though SPT is the #1 seed, the team that went undefeated throughout the standard league play -1 playoff series against SPT was the one. So I can't help but feel like there's at least, that silver lining there in the fact that we may have still some hope coming out from the one. But as we've said, the series we're going to be focused on more on Tempest up against CE. And Tempest really has kind of revitalized, I feel like, their, overall play style when looking at what we've got from them in the mid-season brawl up until phase #2 here so far. So do you agree there, G-Clef?
Yeah, throughout the phase, they had some struggles after the MSB. It's true that they have had some role changes in the middle. Damika switching lane off to the solo lane and flexing into the team. And I think overall, because of the changes, they got better result in Korea. And even against Gen G, they were able to compete really hard against them, though they did drop the series because of that's the reason why they're second place from Korea. But still, they're a really strong team. I feel like right now they're actually better than Ballistics right now.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement there. Considering the track record of the team of Ballistics. But I think you brought up a great point, Dami, and the role adjustments that we've had him moving more to that kind of back line, or not the off lane more to the off lane that we've seen out from him. And that's a really interesting transition here for this squad. And it makes me suddenly wonder, #1, do you believe on, when you see that kind of transition, I guess, Snitch, do you immediately go, this is going to be a problem for this type of team? Because I thought it was very much going to be, especially a player as world-class as Dami, but it seems like they have made, the results really kind of speak for themselves here on the squad.
Yeah, honestly, I think Dami's looked excellent on the melee off-roll, to be honest. He's definitely been a very, very important part of Tempest's run throughout this phase, and I think, we're going to see him being a playmaker here at this Clash.
Yeah, I very much think so here as we're about getting ready here to introduce team #1. Again, the two teams going to be battling it out here. Korea, #2 seed up against 3rd seed of China, CE. One thing we also have to be able to bring out here is the fact that CE, ladies and gentlemen, is not going to be playing with the entire roster that we typically know from them. There's 2 subs moving in here. One player I already have to get your thoughts on, Snitch, because I don't totally know the entire background. I just know it's kind of been like, a go-to player to talk about, and that's got to be Timeless X there for CE.
Timeless X is our famous European pride, I think, honestly.
Right.
Very famous in European Hero League. He played a lot of games, and he became very, very infamous for his aggressive playstyle. So I'm excited to see him bring it out here.
Yeah, I'm ready to see what they have happen here. But we are getting ready here. Ladies and gentlemen, introduction #1 to the blue team.
不是特别自信，因为我们这次少了2名原来的队员，找了2名替补过来比赛，所以只能说我们尽力去打好这个比赛。就是新加入的2个成员的话，因为时间很短嘛，我们磨合度肯定没有原来的队员磨合度高。这次我们参加冬训决赛的话，如果目标的话，就肯定是尽力去拿前4嘛，因为现在就中国队伍现在在东区决赛基本上就没有赢过韩国队伍，希望这次有中国队伍能赢一次韩国队伍。
CE, ladies and gentlemen, on the left-hand side, as you had just heard from them, we have not seen a Chinese team able to hold their own up against Korea yet. But we did highlight one of those subs coming in from the roster. There was another one. It was 5-2-0 coming in for the team. The two members that we did end up losing from the original roster of CE is Aluful and KTY, and those are some of the most decorated players in the Chinese region since, I feel like the second generation of Chinese play. And so this has got to be absolutely devastating for this squad. Are there any immediate concerns? For instance, if you were playing out without your main roster here, Snitch, what are some of the thoughts and fears we can expect out of CE here today?
Yeah, I mean, it must be very troubling, to have to adapt to these subs like so close to the event. But I think, one thing the CE will have going for them is probably a lack of pressure. They won't feel any, extreme pressure to, represent China or perform like super strong as a team because they are playing with these substitute players, which, as we've seen with the leftovers, as we've seen in the past, this can fuel a team to have these kind of miracle runs. Now, is it going to happen with two substitutes? Maybe not, but I do like that CE probably will be feeling very free going into these games.
And so, here G-Clap being the, resident Korean and being such a, knowledgeable member here of the Tempest, when we think of China, we normally think of team fighting to be the strength. And Tempest in the past, that was very much a go-to strength for them.
Yes.
Do you feel, number one, that is a strength still for Tempest? And number two, if it is, does CE have the opportunity to kind of go toe-to-toe in that? Or should they focus more on something like maybe macro?
It is exactly the macro. Tempest, they're still good at team fights, but they also did focus on the macro because they were losing against the top Korean teams because they were suffering on the macro part. They got that part too as well, so I think they're good to go. I think they should just focus on macro, try to not have team fight because he is known for that team fight.
Well, we're going to see if they are in fact focusing on the macro here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be Tempest.
저희 템페스트 팀은 되게 개성이 강한 팀이에요. 선수들 각각 다 개성이 강하고 그만큼 자기 실력에 자신이 있기 때문에 되게 경기력에서 좀 많이 보여지는 것 같아요. 그리고 그만큼 경기에서도 되게 호전적인 팀이에요.
만나는 팀이 어떤 팀이 될지는 모르겠는데 방심하지 않고 제대로 된 플레이를 하려고 생각을 하고 있어요.
어떤 세계대회를 가든 이번에는 우승할 수 있다라는 자신감은 가지고 있는데 그 자신감만큼을 좀 보여줘야 될 것 같아요, 저희도. 그래서 이번에는 좀 더 많이 노력할 것 같고 그만큼 더 좋은 경기력 하고 싶어요.
국내에서 하는 대회인 만큼 많은 팬분들이 찾아오시는데 그에 맞게 이제 열심히 해서 좋은 모습 보여드리도록 하겠습니다.
Tempest, they're a team looking to meet the expectations of the crowd, but I can't help but feel the most difficult expectations for this team are the ones they set for themselves. Now aiming very, very high as, obviously the first place is everybody's aiming for, but they're walking in saying, we're pretty confident we're going to find ourselves in that grand finals. Do you guys agree?
I mean, I think, I think back to Tempest of last year, their last performance when they had Honkoda, this old Tempest roster, I compared to it now, and you can see they've become such a powerhouse throughout this year. Obviously, they weren't satisfied with their MSB placement, but they lost to a very extremely skilled team in Team Limitas, so it's tough to, get too down about that one. But, I mean, since then, the roster swap has looked very, very, or the role swap, sorry, has looked very, very good for them, and I'm excited to see them bring this confidence to this event and see if they truly can take number one.
And talking about confidence, they did go against CE twice back in last MSB and last year's Eastern Clash too, and both times they won against CE. It was best of threes only, not best of five. Still, Tempest going against CE, I feel like the confidence overcarries because they had that experience against a similar roster before.
And, one thing I do want to bring up too when looking at Tempest and the way that we have seen them perform as of late has been, specifically that mid-season brawl and the performance that they had in the group stage. They were very, very dominant. But as the tournament kind of moved on, that team fighting that we knew from them, it seems like they lost confidence within themselves, almost lost their identity to a certain extent, where they would heavily focus onto the macro play, and then suddenly shot calling hit almost a play not to lose rather than to win. And that level of aggression and the expectations we heard there from Sign in the interview, I can't help but feel like those are things we can expect from them today, but we need it throughout the entirety of this tournament if Tempest is going to have a shot at claiming themselves the Eastern champions.
Yeah, because Sign is the first one in this tank line, the first line of things that he makes the play. He sets up lots of the positions for their DPS to actually do the damage from the behind. If he actually goes down in the confidence, he can't flank in from the side. He can't go around the back, look for the back line alone as a tank. His garage plays was awesome, but sometimes when he was not making those splashy plays by alone, their back line, they're not the ones to make the crazy play unless lockdown goes on something like a gust from the backside. That's their initiation. But unless Syme makes those kind of play, I think he's all good to go.
And one thing I got to go ahead and ask here, Snitch, from your perspective when it comes to the overall gameplay and approach, is there, you know, again, when I asked him, do you focus on the macro of your CE? What do you think you would be looking for in this type of situation? What is your go-to to take out what is, I mean, not only an ex-world champion here, but a titan out of the Korean region?
I mean, I think it's just, you know, it's very hard with the substitute players as well. But I think, you know, just kind of, they've had some time to practice together, so we can assume they feel some sort of gel in some way. Like maybe they feel like their team fighting isn't too bad, or they do want to play that sort of style. But I think, as we've said with the other matchups, I think looking at the macro game is probably what the Chinese teams are trying to do a little bit more. Even if it isn't one of their strengths, it's just probably the best way for them to approach these Korean matchups.
It is interesting, you know, whenever we get to these kind of world stages, especially at the Eastern Clashes in such a dominant region like Korea, where it's like, it feels like you have 4 potential world champions every single time that they show up, to really look at the Chinese region and be like, can you play to what is not the go-to play style for the region? It has been something that has very much been growing and developing. And SPT was originally the team that really kind of pushed the macro game for that, again, that second generation of players. But I can't help but feel like teams like the One, that new blood coming in, really pushing the envelope, is something that I hope to see push the gameplay for CE here. And again, maybe make something happen. But again, we've always seen these, you know, roster shuffles and things with the visa issues. It's very difficult for these players here.
There has been issues with lots of the rosters, and I think that's why the Chinese are losing power a little bit more. But once they get their roster, they actually perform a lot better because they cannot get too much practice. Of course, Tempest with the full roster, and they also have the home field advantage being in Korea. They're pretty excited about that as well. They have all the meta right now. I think they're just good to go for the first best of 3. Should be a warm-up game for them.
Very excited here. We're just looking to get things underway here, ladies and gentlemen. You know, just trying to get everybody into lobby and figure things out. When it comes to, I mean, is there, I guess, any major maps or things when knowing this series that you guys through the studies and things like that, that you're like, you know, I want to see this make happen. You know, I want to see the focus onto that. I know immediately when I see a Chinese team against a Korean team, I go, I want to avoid Battlefield of Eternity at absolute all costs. That early game spike and control that you gain. Sky Temple's got to be another one, which, you know, awkwardly enough, has kind of been a go-to for the Chinese region for some time as well. So that kind of overlap makes me feel like those battlegrounds we've got to be avoiding.
Yeah, that's true. And Infernal Shrines is also the one that Korean teams like to play a lot. Though, even though they never really pick maps, they always go for the first pick and get that advantage before we have the second phase of bans. I think their drafting, they focus a lot more on the drafting than the map style. They don't really have specific strategy like the Western team does, where they actually choose map instead of the first ban. So I think it has to be related with a lot of the drafting, how it starts for CE.
Yeah, and here we go. We do actually have the map selections coming in. CE ends up banning Battlefield of Eternity. Brax's holdout being removed by Tempest. No surprise to see the Korean teams want to focus on that one. And then Infernal Shrines, game number 1, but selected here by CE. As we've said, not uncomfortable for Tempest whatsoever. Do you have any immediate thoughts on the ways that you'd like to approach this, knowing that the early game's got to be a focus for China, can't let themselves lose that momentum, Snitch?
Yeah, I think looking at the fact that they've picked Infernal Shrines, let's kind of play to China's strengths. Obviously, they love the Alex Strasser. You think of that as like a staple support pick in China, so they're definitely looking to play towards their comfort style. I think they're probably going to approach the map a little bit of a team fight and try and, you know, win through the early game with these early kind of skirmishes on the shrines. That's kind of what I'm thinking when I see this Infernal Shrines choice.
So then, with that in mind, do you want to see, I don't want to, you know, bust out the Kerrigan because things are coming to like, but that same kind of play style, right? Very much we're going to get that fight. Diablo would very much be that focus in this point in time. You know, get that initiation, get the fight around that objective. And then what do you do to try and limit some of the things like the fall set, which we see out of the Eastern regions, to deal with that macro, maybe give up those early objectives and watch Tempest just get themselves an experience league?
I think it has to be some Daka plays maybe from coming out from CE. I don't exactly know how much of Global they want to focus on the draft because they picked the map and they want to go for Infernal Shrines, which means they want to focus on teamfight. And Tempest, on the other end, they can just totally ignore that, give all the punishers that they want, and they can just out-macro them with the XP, just push the top, push the bottom instead of a fall set. Or even they're saying the Junkrat is actually a better pick because you kind of Junkrat does become kind of semi-global post 13, so he can also poke and get all the defender numbers pretty easily without getting harassed by the opponent. I think they can do this half and half, focus on teamfight a little bit when they have the advantage by the macro, but start focusing on the macro to start off, so they have the advantage and they keep snowballing their advantage towards the late game.
Stitch, you have the same sentiment when looking towards the Falstad with the Junkrat trade-off. I mean, looking at the Western Clash and the Western scene, Falstad is, you know, a bit of isn't Falstad dead type of moment, right? But very much it's not the case when looking at East, and that is not just China. That is China and Korea are very comfortable with that. You know, do you feel like Junkrat, you know, post-13 or even pre-13? What's the trade-offs between those two?
I feel like Junkrat's just kind of fitting a lot better in the meta, especially on Infernal Shrines. He does like these early skirmishes, you know, with the grenades and the splash auto attacks. He can get a lot of value in the early game, and as G-Clef pointed out, you know, post-13 you have that pseudo-global style, and he just kind of scales nicer than Falstad, I think. His damage type fits a lot better into the meta. He looks a lot better on these shrines. You're not as forced into playing this like full macro game style when you do draft the Junkrat, because it allows you to actually teamfight if you want to, without having to get an extremely good setup.
It's a really good point that you end up bringing up here. Trying to look up for some, you know, more interesting talking points here, and the fact that we are going to be approaching Infernal Shrines, ladies and gentlemen, looking to get the draft ready here for these two squads. But I mean, when it really comes down to it, I think the biggest thing I'm concerned about, or what I'm looking for, is about that early game. And as I said, I feel like the Diablo is something that I am going to be concerned. He's gotten to the point where he is so meta that it's like, you know, and with the triple bans, it's kind of hitting that point where you don't have to be too concerned with it. The OPs, right, are suddenly more comfortable to be able to rid of and drop on that. So, you know, is there anything that you expect from Tempest out of what we've gotten from them throughout the standard league play that you're really afraid of on Infernal?
Well, not just from Tempest, because we see a lot more Diablo these days. I think it's going back into pattern where it's kind of like fashion always goes back into the old forms, kind of like that. Where Diablo comes out a lot more, then we'll see a lot more percent damage like Tychus, maybe even Martel coming back into the solo lane. Sometimes, not too often, but Tychus was barely ever played in the Western. I expect to see a little bit more like just like Falstad and ETC, also Tychus a little bit more, especially from the Korean teams.
Yeah, very much so. I can agree with that. And, you know, you brought up a hero that we don't get to see too much in the Western world, but does show up a little bit when looking at the East, especially out of China there, and it's Malthael, something that CE maybe end up looking for in this game on Infernal Shrines. But it just overall, that's a pick that I'm still, you know, pleasantly surprised whenever it comes out and has that kind of success within China, but something to be focusing on here throughout the rest of the Eastern Clash. Snitch, we got a little bit here, it seems. Is there, you know, when looking at the entirety of all these teams, is there any major surprise and difference that you've experienced, not only when looking at Korea, but also China, post-MSB to the results that we've gotten? You know, I look at it and I go, I feel like Gen G, it's a bit expected. Tempest, for me, was probably the most pleasant surprise. Ballistic's a little bit inverse, you know, more on the negative tone there. But what was your interpretation of things, you know, being a competitor and, you know, a challenger to most of these squads?
Yeah, I think the success of Tempest was something I actually definitely enjoyed. I enjoyed seeing how they adapt to this new role swap and just seeing, you know, the way they've changed their style and, you know, how they approach to the game. You know, obviously, we've seen Dami Zerel quite a lot, I think, throughout the phase, and I think he's really, really aggressive on that. And I like to see this kind of play style, you know, where they're playing around kind of their playmakers. Even though the roles are shifting, they're still, you know, maintaining that same kind of, like, I guess, like the way their team played before. It's just the players are in different positions. I think it's really interesting.
You know, now that you bring that up and we have G-Clef here, that's, I think, a great moment to ask a question of, you know, through my, you know, years of studying Heroes of the Storm, Korean teams, it seems like their thought process on the backliners is very different than the rest of the world. It's not so much the, you know, what type of damage, the mage versus the autos. It's very much the primary and secondary, and that just constantly swaps. It's not so much the heroes as much as the idea of their role within the squad. Is that true?
It's mostly of the hero pool of a specific player and the understanding of the draft because of that. Like, if you have lockdown, he will mostly play in range and some mages as well. But there are certain heroes that he would play, he would not play. And they switch back and forth sometimes depending on the meta, but that's how they try to get the perfect draft ready because they do have set roles and set heroes for the teams.
Well, talking about a perfect draft and getting it ready, we have got that here. Ladies and gentlemen, CE up against Tempest on Infernal Shrines. You talked about whether or not Alex Straza would show Snitch, and Tempest says nada.
There's the spicy first ban from Tempest. You know, they must be listening to our desk because clearly they've identified that China is probably looking for the Alex Straza on this map. Easily her best map, I think. And just because it's such a stable pick in general, and they'll pretty much pick it anywhere, I think having so much experience with it would just be even more rewarded on this map for sure.
They're getting so many heroes that CE loves. They are having total understanding of what they would love to pick for the first. Before we get into the second ban phase, we do have the Dragon Queen and the Garrosh ban, even the Diablo. So Sign does have something else that no one else actually plays in Korea, which is a Nubarak. Not too common in Korea, but he's the only one that actually plays lots of Anubarak in multiple maps, Dragon Char, Infernal Shrines, including even Sky Temple sometimes.
Yeah, and normally when I think of the Anubarak selection, that's on Battlegrounds where I feel like there's, you know, high value with getting those individual ganks and heavy laning rotations. Infernal Shrines, to me, I guess at first glance, is not normally the ones that we see that picked up here. As this draft, you know, it's kicking right off here. I was going to ask some question over to Snitch, but Genji up with the first pick there for Tempest, and then a quick Phoenix and Deckard there. Very lethal combo coming out from CE and their 1-2.
I'm quite surprised actually to see the Phoenix here over the Raynor. I think the Raynor fits the Genji matchup much nicer, and I think if you are going to leave the Genji open, having the Raynor instead of the Phoenix will just make your team fights flow much better. It's very dangerous for Phoenix to play into, especially the modern Genji build with the X-Strike and the Shingan. It's very, very dangerous. And the early Sergeant Hammer here as well for Tempest is just very Korean.
They may just go full BFG and make sure the Genji gets the kill, gets the reset, gets an escape. Genji is never ever open, guys, in Korea, and I think we are about to see the reason why it is always being banned.
Yeah, resets after resets there, and that is not talking about Genji, ladies and gentlemen. Stukov silence, not going to be an option as the last ban is used there for CE. A little bit curious to be able to see the Stukov value, but also Korea has been one of the few compared to, especially the Western world, and the Malfurion changes are part of the reason he's kind of risen a priority. But overall, you know, Stukov has remained a part of the meta at the eastern part of the scene. And then a Chromie coming out. Bit curious on that one.
Just in case, because against the Sergeant Hammer can stack pretty easily. Of course, does not really die against her, but Tempest, I think they are really concerned about the support and choking the backline of DPS for CE. Which is not a bad pick, just in case. I think they're just looking for the just in case because if they just go to the basics of how they play Heroes of the Storm, they can just snowball that lead that they have into the game.
Seems like a very stick-together, slow kind of approach to a team fight here when looking at CE's composition. The armor opportunities coming out from Urel. Deckard one is sitting back and kind of post up. Phoenix with those auto attacks. And Johanna, you know, rather effective with the peel there onto the blind. Do you have any first, I guess, concerns or maybe big holes when looking at the composition that you see on the side of CE here for Infernal Shrine Snitch, or?
Honestly, I think CE's drafted a very solid composition. There is the Anubarak, as we said. I was thinking, like, with the way that the draft is panned out, the early tank bans on Garrosh and Diablo, I think Joanna is the next best in line. So I was kind of surprised to see Tempest not take that. And there's the Azmodan, actually, which makes the Joanna make even more sense. You know, we have, obviously, Zhu has been playing Azmodan throughout the season, so, and we have heard rumors that he's been putting out here. So this is a bit of an exciting game. And I do think Shrines, actually, is one of my favorite Azmodan maps.
Yeah. It's one of the few battlegrounds it feels like where Azmodan, you know, has the opportunity to be rather effective within the earlier stages of the game, but if you make it to the later part, his passive can be rather problematic. There's some really cool aspects of Azmodan overall here. I did not think that we'd get it here, but I can't help but feel like game number one up against Korea, if you feel like you're in the underdog, you might as well not only bring out the, you know, comfort that you have of your own, but your own individual flavor, hoping to catch Tempest off guard.
Yeah, make sure this is only best of 3. If you want to do it, you should do it on game number 1. Make sure that you have the opponent kind of flattered. What are they trying to do? You can't read their mind right now exactly on what they want to do. So Tempest, I'm pretty sure they found themselves a little bit flustered after that Azmodan pick, last pick.
Yeah, you think so? Just how big of a, I guess, kind of setback is that? Because I guess Korea is not a region that we often look at for those, you know, pocket picks.
I remember Azmodan being picked from Raven, which is a very old team that no one wants to remember anymore. But we do have the Azmodan sometime from quite a while, actually a lot in Hero League, and especially in the solo queues in the Korean region. But it is not a competitive pick, I would say. Agreed with Genji and also Tempest. Agreed with Ballistics as well, but we do have one from CE. Let's see what happens.
Snitch, I got to go ahead and ask, why don't we see that much Azmodan? What's the holes here? What do we expect Tempest to kind of do to dismantle the struggles of Asma?
I mean, you can tell I'm very excited. I actually love the Azmodan since the rework, but my drafter doesn't let me play it. Wibby's very mean to me, and he puts my Azmodan in the closet. But, you know, I actually really enjoy the Azmodan style. I think if you get out of this kind of, you know, early game trench and you manage to get into the mid game, you have so much control with Titus in of the side lanes that you could just constantly be balling side lanes and have complete control on the map if you're playing it effectively. Obviously, they're going to be looking for stacking in the early game, trying to get those early stacks in, you know, make sure that he's scaled enough by the time that he unlocks his heroic to be able to manipulate the map effectively. But I actually think the Azmodan is a very, very solid pick if you could get out of this, you know, early game trench, like I said.
And that is where I want to raise a bit of a, you know, when looking towards Korea, the opponents on the other side of the battlefield, and what the biggest strengths are. For me, Infernal Shrines is Korea's battleground, purely on the fact that they get more out of Punishers than any other part of the world. They do not mess around. When that puppy leaps, there's likely a couple heroes going to follow up behind that, and that is where I guess I wonder, is the Azmodan too dependent on those later stages of the game? Yes, Infernal Shrines one of the better ones to stall it out, but Korea is the best to just make sure it doesn't make it to the level 20 spot.
I guess for their own team strategy for CE, they had some weakness on the late game calls back in China games, and talking about the latest playoff ones especially, and see they made some weird calls where they had the advantage but threw that out in the late game. So with Azmodan getting this power spike at the late game, I think it may be just trying to fill in the hole as a new roster, just picking all the heroes that they're good at. I think it could be a chance against Tempest.
Yeah, we'll find out here as we got the votes rolling in from you guys at home. And no surprise, they're heavy favorites, going over 87%, falling on the sides of the world champions there of Tempest in the past, and then CE still trying to look and make it happen. No faith in the Azmodan at home.
It's very disappointing, honestly.
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
I think of all the the drafts you've seen so far, this one is the most interesting to me. And I think we could definitely see the Azmodan kick off here, and maybe Tempest aren't expecting it and don't know what to do, and it will take over the game.
Well, we're about to find out as we're getting ready here. Game number 1 again between Tempest and CE, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if Azmodan can make it happen. Here they are in the blue. Ladies and gentlemen, it is CE representing China, looking to make something happen here with the Azmodan. We're going to have Timeless, 365, Wind, Shuyu, and 5-2-0.
And in red, we do have Tempest. Locked down on Sergeant Hammer. Good on that Genji. Dami on plays as usual. Sign on his signature hero, Anubarak, and Hyde on Malfurion.
And as I kind of highlighted a little bit when looking towards the draft, I can't help but feel like, you know, the Anubarak there for Sign, though it is not that common around the world, he's very, very good on that little bug, making sure that it doesn't get squashed. But it doesn't have the same gank potential, kill potential like on maps like Dragonshire that you talked about before. So I'm going to be looking at Sign and how impactful here he is throughout this game and locking down CE and setting up those kills.
Usually Sign would go around and try to look for flank from the side where it's blinded by the other team with the fog. But in this case, because they do not have a rail to kind of peel for the Sergeant Hammers, I may just be around providing the CC, trying to delay the charge that comes out from CE, the damage that they try to provide. And it's always good to have an eye on Sign where he tried to stand in the middle, and he's always off to the side trying to provide some information for the team.
Already laning situation, though, working out very well here for Tempest as they're getting the pressure with that 1-1-3. Tri-lane down on the bottom half. CE looking to get a response. Johanna and Asmo making something happen, but this is something that I was kind of, you know, lightly alluding to into the draft, and something that I think is going to be a concern is the early game of Azmodan is very, very vulnerable, much like Abathur, to these early game pressure and siege. And conveniently enough, Sergeant Hammer, that's probably her forte. Hold up, though. Caught out here is going to be Phoenix with that impale. First blood over to Tempest. Great initiation.
That's a focus fire from Korea. And the reason why Genji is banned all the time, and good on that hero. He's pretty good, as you can see. That was mostly just damage from 2 heroes only, and Phoenix is already gone.
The one thing that the Anubarak does end up providing, though, with the initiations that we do see is it's great follow-up on right after that Punisher leap over the wall, and spawning those little beetles, making it that much, you know, more convenient to be able to get those dive in. CE has to be able to find a way to slow down this game. Tempest is not, you know, by no means opening it up out of control here yet, G-Clef, but knowing the power levels and what we've already gotten from these 2 regions, I can't help but feel like I'm just, you know, sitting here just going, oh, one step in the wrong direction, and suddenly Tempest is just going to say GG, no read. Yeah,
it is going to be certainly CE trying to get extra information and exactly knowing where good and Sign is all the time, because once they get baited by the Sergeant Hammer, Genji and the Anubarak will be waiting for that bait. The lockdown is basically sitting there saying, come in if you want to.
Challenge if you dare, says Tempest here, posting up on the bottom half. Got ourselves the first shrine here. It's going to be spawning over mid, but with Tempest having an advantageous laning circumstance, it doesn't really force them to answer to it. And right now, they are very much not showing any interest whatsoever. The tri-lane still continuing there through bottom, even locking down another kill there onto Phoenix. Tempest just not letting go of this bottom lane. And somebody has to be able to find a way to stop the bleeding. Either they're on the kills on the Phoenix or the pressure from lockdown.
And Phoenix, you can't even get close to where the war zone is. Once you just get stuck with one CC, the follow-up CC continues, you cannot warp out. And the focus fire, the burst damage that comes out from Genji, and also the Sergeant Hammer. Phoenix, you cannot be in the middle, or you just got to stay in the back, not really looking for your chance to do any damage. Maybe just go to an off lane, look for some extra soak. I think that is the best idea right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, looking for that off lane pressure and looking for that off lane soak is probably going to be in their best focus. But I really, really appreciate what we see from Tempest here. And the biggest thing is just not playing a traditional approach to the battleground, knowing the compositional flaws there of that Asmodan and looking for, you know, ways to be able to exploit the advantages they have there with the Sergeant Hammer. It's just clever play there. It's not revolutionary. It's not going to, you know, innovate the game for the rest of the world, but it very much is just cheeky play. And why Tempest is very much a dominant force here at the Eastern Clash.
And because they have the early snowball, they're just getting all the defenders quite easily. They had all the wave clear and making sure they lose anything, using that mobility of Genji to get the extra soak. When the Blaze is down here, they're just distributing perfectly at the moment. And it is something that we see from Dami only from Korea. He actually goes to the flame build usually, which is not really too common in the rest of the world, but it is something to see.
It's interesting to see that here. CE's trying to figure out what they want to make happen here when looking towards those skeletal defenders. A significant disadvantage there. 520 is going to move up and drop a hammer, buy a bit of breathing room for CE here. Lockdown and Friends, you're going to try and confirm the rest of this as though there's only 5 skeletal defenders needed. Sign ends up joining the rest of the squad. Punisher will be picked up for Tempest. See if CE can hold their own, because as we said before, it's likely going to be a heavy dive coming out from Tempest if they get any opportunity to do so.
Oh yes, Blaze is away with the Aerial. That's what making it 4v4 here. But with the Punisher, Tempest does have the advantage. They're just pushing in, has some siege. Look where good is. He will just go in, pressure all of them. And Blaze coming out from the side. They have to be careful. See, maybe they don't know exactly what's happening.
Dami hits the 3-man jet propulsion. Ends up getting the condemn, but you know, it's just forcing CE back there. I like that Tempest didn't get too hypey with the aggressive positioning there of Dami throwing down the oil. Nice scroll of sealing there will end up buying room. But look at this, Tempest 2 forts already with the first Punisher of the game. That early game slowdown that we needed, that CE was desperately wanting, is anything but what we see unfolding here in game 1.
And Tempest knows exactly what they want to do. They want to slow down everything at least. Have at least one of a level gap between the two teams, because they do have Asmodan late game. They will have a lot of hard spikes. The Tempest snowballing super hard. This is not the usual tempo. We would see this from sometimes ballistic if they have to do it when there's an Asmodan, where lots of times Genji where they will just speed through the first force because they want to create the gap before it happens. Tempest, they're actually leaping forward, making it faster against CE today.
Yeah, it's going to be cool now because Tempest has a couple of curious questions on how do they want to approach this. With Hammer and this, how big of an advantage they have, yes, a keep front wall and double keep front wall is a very realistic option. Or they might want to go for a little bit of damage onto that keep. If we do see them focusing onto the keep and just get a little bit of extra damage on that, I can't help but feel like that is showing Tempest is very much looking for a win condition as soon as possible. Even so much as to why you see that focus onto the sidewall there for Tempest. CE, though, does have a silver lining, and that is the fact that Heroics will be here over about the next 30 seconds. But they need them so very desperately. Otherwise, Lockdown is just having an absolute heyday there on Hammer.
Just for 10. Heroes coming down, and they do have the information, so they back out immediately. Blaze is the only one up on that, getting that wave through. Let's see if CE can.
4.
Perfect time, level 10.
They got to do it. They got to make something happen here. CE's looking to make it happen. 520 ends up hitting the hammer, sending him back a little bit, but he falls very low. Leap number 2 going in. Lockdown takes the Tranquility. Blessed Shield dropped there by the wind, but Lockdown is fine and dandy here. 520 ends up using the Heroic there. Ardent Defender to get the peel out, and look at this. Blaze is back in here. Tempest is now going to want to turn this fight, but with Phoenix stuck into the cocoon, they'll just go ahead and take their dead little guy there and go ahead and say thank you for the skirmish.
Yeah, Phoenix was alone there. Sign was marking him the entire time. We didn't really get to focus on Sign. What he was doing, he was body blocking on time near the shrine. Why was Phoenix there first of all? That would be my first question. And that's already, I believe, 3. That's only for Phoenix.
Yeah, I can't help but feel like that was, you know, with the positioning onto the Phoenix, it was very much those moments of desperation, right? We know CE understands that this game is quickly falling out of their grasp, and so with that, with the force attempt at the initiation and 520 with that Yrel flank, it's just one of those, you know, being so desperate to force that you almost neglect your own positioning. And great punishment from Tempest. And I can't help but feel like it is not over yet, as there's now 20 seconds from that top shrine. And more importantly, Tempest quickly closing in on 13.
I was actually expecting a Planet Cracker from Phoenix, because you can, if you have the salvo, you do have to close yourself into your opponent somewhat to get the damage in. So making sure you're behind is providing some extra damage, maybe securing the kill with the Planet Cracker could have been a better choice in this case. But seeing where he is off to the acting like that's almost like a tank onto the side. That's a weird positioning from Phoenix so far.
Yeah, it is definitely a little bit curious here. Scroll ceiling going to be used there, but the unstoppable aura drop there for Hammer. Yrel with a decent attempt onto the flank. We do see Genji here still showing interest towards the mid lane. I can't help but feel like he's going to make the transition up, and when he does, CE needs to make sure that they do not get the flank and prep him for a reset. Otherwise, Tempest is going to have a heyday there. 13 talents here picked up. Genji now in position. We'll see what they can make happen.
This is the moment that CE wants to pressure it, because even though Tempest does have 13, this shrine actually has less of an escape route. When the Johanna goes in, gets multiple men condemned, as long as they focus fire onto 1-2.
Well, Shield was actually dropped. Tranquility as well with the stay a while and listen after the bunker goes through. Ardent Defender getting the heals after that fire from the bunker thrown down. 520 tries to get the escape, but Genji goes in, and as you said, good showing why Korea never lets the hero through. Reset one, sign's not done. Another lockdown on the Timeless. 2 for nothing. Tempest is just dominating.
They don't care about the shrine. They care about the team fight a lot more. Look at that. When everything's out, or the defender's out, the Blessed Shield, everything is basically outside, but they don't really care too much about damage. They do have the sustain from Malfurion, so it kind of deletes all the damage that comes in from the salvo. And once Good sees the opportunity, just dashes in, gets the kill, escapes. That's the Korean Genji you would expect to see in the Eastern Clash.
Yeah, and it was right. I mean, that was max range on that switch strike. It felt like I actually thought he wasn't even going to get the model past it, but he just barely ended up having it there, showing that, you know, just absolute precision from Good. And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, if you were not a Tempest fan for a long period of time, that is not the role that we have come to know Good onto. It very much was those warriors into that off lane, and now it's just that flashy cyberkinetic ninja.
He's actually a melee assassin specialist in the team. He does not do Genji too many times, and he does not do ranged assassins as much, but still providing. And the fact that he was not able to play competitively because Genji was banned all the time shows something else that he has. Of course, the range, it's been some time, was nerfed from, I believe, 17 to 15. Sometimes you just think about the old range, you think you're going to hit the target, but just understanding the hero. Yeah, so it shows here.
Yeah, it very much does. CE will be able to pick up the 13 talents here. Tempest going to get the follow-up after this Punisher leap come through. When questioning if he can get the bait, he will, forcing out the Iron Skin. That is where Tempest is going to try and take advantage of. That cooldown being down. Good. Threatening Shuryu back for a moment here. As Lockdown focuses here onto the keep with the Punisher. Leap up in a couple of seconds. CE understands, forcing them back, but it comes at the cost here of the keep.
Getting more. Drawing the Punisher into the mid kit, but still Tempest, they're looking for more kills. There's a counter engage from Decker, trying to get something against. He does get the kill. Secure with X-Strike.
He ends up securing that with X-Strike, and Tempest just wastes no time here. Takes the Punisher, moves all the way onto the core, and now they're getting 4 damages of shielding. Already dropped, Lockdown still posted up. 2-man jab propulsion locked there from Dami. We see the salvo out, but the Cocoon is actually going to buy the time. Trank is used, 520, trying to survive. Ardent Defender used, but the core, 30% in counting, G-Clef.
They're looking for the KDAs. Here, by this point, they have all the shields out. Or going down for short Tempest. They want to pick up maximum kills before they have the core here, and that's going to be the first game going to Tempest.
Very, very clean play there from Tempest, having themselves an 8-0 shutout. Game 1 on Infernal Shrines. That was just absolutely stellar performance, but one that I can't help but feel like had a bit to do with a lot of this early game pressure and focus we know Korea is going to be applying throughout the entirety of this tournament, and a bit when reflecting back towards that draft. Snitch, do you agree? Not agree?
I mean, did they lock in Phoenix or Phoenix? Because it's pretty close to it. I mean, I'm just going to say Timeless X is very famous for his either, you know, unstoppable games or his consistent running it down games, and I think this one we may have got one of the latter ones. Very, very good prioritization on the rotations from Tempest to be able to punish that Phoenix in the early game. But like I said, I feel like the Phoenix matchup into the Genji was not good at all, and it's a very, very hard matchup to play, and I feel like he was getting consistently punished by the Anubarak Genji combo.
One thing I got to ask you about was that first Punisher, that first approach to that. You know, beyond the fact they were able to get the kill onto the Phoenix in that downtime, but specifically I'm trying to highlight the ignoring it for a period of time and focus on to that bottom part. Is that partly, you know, reflecting the lack of early game presence that we know from that composition on the side of CE, or is that merely just the advantage you have on the hammer in that 1-1-3 laning situation Tempest found themselves in?
I mean, I think it's definitely a bit of both. Obviously, they were adapting to, like, CE can't really do anything about it, so why don't we just take this first?
Yeah.
But these hammer compositions, if you don't have a good way to counter the hammer, this is what they get away with. You know, you siege up the hammer, you set up a wall in front of her, nobody's getting to that hero. And she'll just slowly, like, chip down the fort more and more. And eventually, I guess they were just like, oh, we'll just take this bot fort because it's basically free. So I actually really liked the strategical decision to delay the Punisher. Like, it was very, very nice to, you know, get these even bigger structure and XP leads just for basically for nothing. And I think it was very, very well played by Tempest.
Is there anything that you were, number one, surprised with on the side of Tempest and maybe would like to see in game 2 different here, G-Clef, for CE? I can tell you, for me, definitely draft is one thing I'd like to see.
For CE, I think they just stole away Eero with less of an idea of what to do. She was actually making an engage when she was supposed to peel for the target. When Genji comes in, you're supposed to peel away so your hero actually survives. She was supposed to be a lot more passive towards your own teammate than to engage and try to get that hammer onto Siege. Sergeant Hammer, which was barely possible with all the peels that Tempest actually had. Maybe CE changing towards... I know Chinese teams, they're always super aggressive. They want to have the team fight. They want to fight all the time in the shrine. They want to force that, but maybe changing their style a little bit too passive when they actually want to go late game, then you shouldn't really having that many fights in the early game.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I would also like to see here, now that CE is given the opportunity to decide what they want to do when it comes to first pick or to the map pick. Personally, I would like to see them try to find a way. I would like to see them move into map pick because I feel like that sets the tempo more than the draft itself, and the tempo is very, very important for them. And so avoiding, you know, Battlegrounds, Inferno Shrines was an amazing one, but again, BOE, Sky Temple, things like that to avoid that early game pressure out here. So it's going to be interesting to see what we end up getting here. Bans coming through, and it's going to be selected there by CE to go to Sky Temple. This is very, very curious for multiple reasons. Snitch, you have an interesting look. I'm just going to let you go.
I mean, like you said, you know, it seems like a bit of a dangerous map to choose, but
yes.
I mean, you know, China, very famous for their Sky Temple play, but again, like I said, the overlap with Korea, you have to wonder if this is going to be the map, you know, that works for them. But again, you know, we're talking about a CE with 2 substitute players. We're talking about a CE don't have much practice for this tournament. Maybe this is the best way for them to go. If they find comfort on Sky Temple, good for them. I mean, I hope, you know, that they can show a better performance on this map than the first game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing that I always adore about the Sky Temple play out of China is their giant knight rotation. I think is some of the coolest that we see out of a majority of the teams here. But actually, I was just given the information that we have a map change, and I'm not curious if that was a graphic misplay or whatever it kind of came through, but it's Towers of Doom will in fact actually be the battleground we are playing on, ladies and gentlemen. A bit less surprising for me and when it comes to the tempo and things alike, but Towers of Doom forces you still to skirmish, much like Sky Temple. So if we see Tempest gain a little bit control, one talent tier advantage, I still feel like CE's got to find ways to be proactive from minute 1.
Yeah, it's going to be a different one, and we do see sometimes some Dehaka, even Martel solo lane, just to have that lane dominant and make sure you have the top one secured and then join the team fight at the bottom. That's the usual Chinese style that we actually see. But for Tempest, I think they're really going to focus on the global, try to macro this one out. Game 1, it was basically going towards the tempo, speeding it up, gaining the fort, getting the early advantage, not really focusing on macro too much, but actually having heavy on team fight against CE. But this one, I think they may just avoid to fight and macro the entire game out.
Yeah, macro that entire game and, you know, able to control the bottom half of the background's important when looking at Towers of Doom. How big of a concern after what we saw there from Tempest with the Sergeant Hammer? When I go control over the bottom bell tower, Sergeant Hammer is one of the first things that like goes, please not like this, because once she gets control, there's no reverting from that. So do you go, does this demand a ban by any means on the side of CE, or do you feel like that's very much a fool me once type situation?
I mean, I think it's definitely another very solid hammer map. We could definitely look at it coming out in the draft here. But again, it's a hero, it's a hero that takes some setup in the draft. I don't think first pick hammer is going to be super reliable, especially because Chromie isn't the worst on this map, and it's a very, very obvious counter. If they can get the Chromie in the 1-2 because they showed the hammer so early, it might not work. But obviously, with Tempest having the first pick here, they have the ability to get the hammer in the 2-3 and then ban the Chromie. So it is something that is going to have to be on the forefront of CE's minds, and maybe a 1-2 ban is going to be one of the way they want to deal with it.
Yeah, with a Genji ban, please.
With the Genji ban? Is that the must request from G-Clef?
Yes.
You know what? We're about to find out, ladies and gentlemen, as we got draft number 2. It's going to be on Towers of Doom here from CE and Tempest getting